This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we'll discuss psychological and emotional issues common in today's world and what to do about them. I'm Dr. Margaret, and SelfWork is a podcast dedicated to you taking just a few minutes today for your own self-work. Hello, and welcome to SelfWork. I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. I'm a clinical psychologist out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I've been in practice for over 25 years. And I began this podcast last year in order to extend the walls of my practice and reach out to those who might already be interested in therapy and psychological issues, but also to those who might be curious about what someone like me, a psychologist, would have to say about various things in our culture. So welcome today. We have a special treat today. Many of you may know The Mighty, which is a tremendous website that features not only mental health, but all kinds of medical issues. And today we're going to be talking with Sarah Schuster. Sarah has a very simple, elegant bio. She says she runs the mental health section at The Mighty. Actually, her title is editor. She graduated with a journalism degree from Syracuse University and currently lives in Los Angeles. I am privileged to have several pieces on The Mighty, as well as doing a monthly Facebook Live for them, which is something I look forward to every month. Mostly we do it on depression and anxiety. It's on the third Wednesday of the month, if any of you would like to join me there on mental health on The Mighty. But today we're going to be talking to Sarah about not only her job and her position at The Mighty, but her own personal journey with anxiety, which she's very open about. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. How would you describe The Mighty's, like their mission for anyone not knowing about it?
Yeah, so The Mighty has actually changed since I've been there. I've been there for 3 years now, which is so intense to think about. But I think at the basis of what we are is that we're an online community, right? We're an online community for people who live with different mental illnesses, different chronic illnesses, disabilities, autism. We basically want to be a space where people can have honest conversations about their health. At the beginning, that just looked like stories, right? We were publishing articles, kind of hoping that people would find them when they need them. An example I like to say is that we want to be the person or the place that you find when you're Googling information about your disorder. So instead of just finding WebMD, you're actually taken to a portal of all these personal stories.
Well, I think you've accomplished that mission. It's an incredible site. And I will tell the listeners, they have over 600 different illnesses that you can click on and learn more about and hear about from the people who actually have those illnesses or their family members or somebody associated with the problem.
Yes. And that's what it is, right? It's really about finding information about what you're going through. That's personal. That's from a person who's been there. And that's kind of the basis of what we do. And now, along with the story sharing, we also, we'll write about news we think is relevant to the community. We create content we think is relevant to the communities. And we also just launched a feature that's more of a platform. So even if you're not a writer, even if you're not someone who necessarily wants to write an essay, you can still post to themighty.com and receive feedback from people who've been there. So that's kind of what we're starting. And hopefully as our community grows, it'll also be less online. Hopefully there'll be stuff that happens outside the internet too. But the base of what we do is community stories, first person's accounts of just people's different experiences.
So have you been involved since the very beginning, or did you get on board a little later?
Yeah, so I came on, I want to say it was a little bit after The Mighty's first birthday. It's funny because I actually remember the launch of The Mighty because the editor-in-chief, Meg Griffo, the woman who really spearheaded the editorial team, we actually went to school together.
Oh, how
neat. We weren't friends, but we were friends. We were friends enough to be friends on Facebook. Like we had just really briefly crossed paths at like a student publication. And I remember the day she launched The Mighty, reaching out to her out of the blue and being like, hey, this looks really cool. At that point, I was still in school. I wasn't even thinking about what I wanted to do. But I remember the first day The Mighty started, and I want to say about maybe a year and a half later is when I ended up coming on. And I came on as a contributing editor, which meant I just edited general stories. And then soon after, I want to say maybe 5 months later, we launched the mental health section. And then so I was the first person to spearhead the mental health section.
And that's how I first met you, because you got back with me when I submitted a piece. I kept seeing the mighty.com and I thought, what is it? And I went to go look and I thought, well, I'm a therapist. Can therapists, submit? And I did. I submitted some Perfectly Hidden Depression, which I've done a lot of podcasts on that too. And it was well received. And so I've just been very, very happy with the relationship. Can anybody submit? And as a psychologist, I know that journaling can often be really, really helpful to someone. But having a piece published on an internationally known site is, a huge leap from that. And some of the pieces are incredible. But I wonder if you have any way of gauging whether someone is ready for that kind of exposure.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a few criteria we look at when we choose pieces. I think the number one thing that has stayed pretty consistent since I've been here is, will the story help someone? That's pretty much the number one question that I try to answer when I'm reviewing a piece. We get so many amazing submissions. And like you said, we can't take all of them really because of just time and our staff, right? I only have 2 editors working with me on the mental health section.
Oh, wow.
And if I could publish and work with almost every piece we got, I definitely would, right? But that's not the reality. So the first question we ask is, will this help someone? Like you said, I'm a journaler, right? Journaling is so important for a lot of people just to get things out of your head.
You bet.
And if you look back at your own journal, you can see okay, this was good for me, but I don't know if this would necessarily help someone else on their journey. So we really intentionally choose stories that are obviously personal, that are raw, but also have some kind of takeaway that we feel could help someone else. So the takeaway can be a lot of things, right? Sometimes if someone's explaining a really unique experience in a cool, interesting way, the takeaway could be someone else reads that and realizes, oh my God, I'm not the only one who goes through that.
Yes.
One of my favorite comments I've ever seen on a Mighty story is people who say, this is something I've experienced. I've just never known how to say it. And you said something that I've been thinking my entire life. That is the best. So that's a huge thing. Or if someone just has a specific take on something that we feel maybe other people hadn't thought of that way. That's really what we're looking for, some kind of takeaway. So I feel that's kind of the first filter. And some stories we just don't publish because there may be more personal musings. Maybe there's less something we feel other people can grab onto. And we're also looking for things technical stuff like word count. If someone writes a 3,000 word essay, that's not something we necessarily work with. So we're really looking for pieces of people's lives that are kind of concise, that have something people can take away from. And we also tend to not publish what we call more journey stories, which is somebody kind of telling their whole story from start to finish. This is when I first started experiencing anxiety. This is when I got diagnosed. This is what happened then and then and then and then. We actually prefer people who tell us moments. So we're really into looking at people's moments in their life, moments in their journey with mental health or whatever they're writing about. And those tend to be the stronger pieces that we end up publishing. And those are the pieces that make an impact.
Having this job of running this site and reading all these pieces, what do you find is changing in you? You may talk with the staff about this, and I'm around, I do therapy 4 days out of 5 of the week. And, I hear tremendous courage but I also hear a lot of pain. And I wonder how that's impacting you and your staff?
That's a great question. There are definitely days that are harder than others when you're talking about reading a lot of people's pain, right? And something that I have to tell, there's a few things. Something that I definitely tell my editors, and something I hope they try to practice, is kind of making sure that the stories that you're editing are really balanced with what you can handle that day. So we have my editor, Juliet's really amazing. And she ends up, because of her own personal experience, writing and editing a lot about trauma. And there are days when she does 4 trauma pieces in a row. And it's just gotta do something else. Gotta move on.
She did a great piece on the second year of 13 Reasons Why, warning people not to read it, not to watch it. I thought it was a great piece. I shared it on my Facebook page.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no, she does a lot of great work in like the trauma space. She writes a lot about entertainment, but I think part of what we have to do is be honest about our limits and say that there's some days where, I can't edit another piece that's dark
Hmm.
or about suicide or about, sadness. So I'm going to move on and do something lighter. You'll also see that we have a lot of meme pieces or we have some
Yeah.
lighter
Yeah.
pieces and it's not and people like them but also it's not entirely random. It's like for ourselves we kind of have to balance. That's something that I really think. But another thing is too, just I mean, and I'm sure you know what this is like, you have to really have, I call it like my editor hat,
Hmm.
where I can count on like one hand how many stories have actually kind of really affected me where I had to like leave the office.
Hmm.
But for the most part I'm able to kind of do it with a certain level of distance where I always go in a story with like a mission in mind. The mission is I'm crafting the story for it to reach someone else. And if I get like personally affected by every story that I read, I wouldn't be able to do it. So there is a level of, I think, like professional distance that kind of helps us survive. It also
Sure.
just like talking about it too in the office, like making sure that we have an open environment where you can talk about how, like a great example actually is with people kind of expressing their limits is I did, you mentioned 13 Reasons Why. I did none of the 13 Reasons Why coverage. I did not watch 13 Reasons Why. I knew as soon as I heard that season one featured a suicide scene that
Hmm.
I was not, just based on my personal experience, I was not going to be able, that wasn't going to be good for me.
Hmm. Good for you.
So just kind of being able to express limits was really important for me to learn. And I guess
Hmm.
I hope my team feels like they can do that too, because it can be hard, but it's also really inspiring, right? I feel like for every piece that's really heartbreaking, there are 10 more that are really inspiring.
Yes.
So
Maybe
that
it's
helps.
important for listeners to understand that when you say you're working with a piece, that if their piece is accepted, it will also be edited. You'll get some help with it to make sure that it's something that you feel good about and the editors feel good about, that you don't just put it out with no help at all.
Yeah, and it's not just, I really feel like we nourish these pieces. That's really how I feel when I'm working with a piece. Like, yeah, we're looking for typos, we're looking for grammar stuff, which happens to everyone. But there is a lot of love and energy that goes into each piece. And
Hmm.
that's definitely like an emotional toll that is very worth it. But it's a toll, and so it's a lot about balance, a lot about knowing your limits. But again, for the most part, it's so rewarding that there are only a few times I feel like where we've had to like pump the brakes and be like, okay, like, a little too much time to take a break.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. That's sort of self-care, very important in our profession. And so, people ask me, how do you listen to problems all day? And one of the things I tell them is I also see tremendous strength every day and tremendous, I said courage before, but it is courage. And that's, I focus on that as well. Now, I know you made a choice that I've also made as a psychologist. You talk about your own anxiety. You've written about it. Some of your pieces have gone wildly viral. And so what was that choice like for you to go on and talk about what happened to you? And the rest of your staff does it too.
Yeah. So to me, I've always processed what I've gone through writing.
Mm-hmm.
So before I was publishing stuff on The Mighty, I was writing about it in my journal. In college, I was writing about it in creative writing classes that I took, and even in my work in journalism when I was taking journalism classes.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wasn't writing about myself, before I kind of even had like mental health as a thing I might pursue professionally, I was writing about mental health in my journalism classes. A lot of the time
Okay.
we got to choose a topic, and I would gravitate towards writing about mental health issues, even though it wasn't something publicly I was ever talking about. The first time I wrote about my own mental health was actually for an Active Minds blog that I became a part of my junior year of college. And it was literally like a coming out piece about going to the counseling center.
Wow.
And at that point, I had told no one that I was struggling with the passive suicidal thoughts I was struggling with the anxiety I was struggling with the negative self-thoughts and depression I was struggling with, I would literally, put on my gym clothes to go to therapy because I didn't want my roommates to know where I was going.
Yeah.
And when I wrote about it, and again, the word distance feels very cold, but I was able to present it in a way that I had control over. I was really scared about talking about it with anyone, but for me to craft a piece, that was kind of the only way I could express what I was going through. And It got to a point where I kind of needed to. So I remember putting that piece out and seeing all the responses and having people who I, wasn't even that close to say, I also go to the counseling center. Like, oh my goodness, like no one was talking, the counseling center exists and no one was talking about, who was going or who wasn't going. It was such a, a dirty secret. And so I think that was a huge spark for me where I was like, okay, like even if I have a hard time talking about what I'm going through to my friends and family, writing is a way I can do it in a way that I feel like I still have a little control over. And I really enjoy that process and I really enjoyed the feedback. I actually think writing about it came before I could even talk to my friends and family about it, strangely enough. I don't know why. There's something about crafting something and putting on the internet that actually felt easier to me than looking my boyfriend in the eye and being like, I'm struggling. That's actually stuff I'm still working on now.
I had the exact same experience. And I had Jennifer Marshall on about a month or so ago of This Is My Brave. And I did the This Is My Brave here locally last year. And, I'd written about my panic disorder. I'd written about my history with an eating disorder. But to get up there in front of 200 people, and even in rehearsal, I got emotional. And it was just something about, it was a vulnerability that I did not feel as much when I put it on the internet. Although I did wonder if people would say, well, I'm not going to go to her for therapy. She's not well yet.
Oh, that's so funny, but it's such the opposite. People want to know
that's
that
what I found.
Are human, and I'm sure you know that in your own practice.
I knew it in my head, but not necessarily in my gut.
And I feel like that happens to a lot of advocates too, where you're expected to be well if you're writing about it and you're talking about it. That's just not the case. It's actually a pretty dangerous mindset that people who are helping other people can't be struggling themselves,
Right. So this is a easy segue into stigma. Do you think that the Mighty is having an impact on stigma? What kind of feedback are you getting from people who read things and think, okay, I am gonna talk to my friend or my spouse or my parents, or I'm gonna go to counseling. Do you have any kind of indication of how the Mighty and other sites like This Is My Brave and Stigma Fighters with Sarah Fader? My guess would be you don't have a real tangible way of seeing that. You're just trying to put it out there and change our culture.
Yeah, well, I think the few tangible things we can hold on to is when people share our stories, right? So just like for me, it was easier to write about it than to talk about it. I think for some people, having the Mighty as a tool to share what they're going through. So even if you're not someone who's comfortable sharing your own story, to share a Mighty story, to email someone a Mighty story is a really good way to say, this is something that I relate to.
Sure. I've had people say, well, I don't ever like any of your pieces because my friend will see it and know that, that I have it. And so when they do share it and when they do quote unquote like it, then it shows a lot of growth in that area on their part.
Yes, exactly. And obviously not everyone is ready for it, but I do think the Mighty pieces can be used as conversation starters. And as many people who don't feel comfortable commenting because they don't want people to see their name associated with like an article about depression, for example, right. I do hope that at least a few people, maybe for the first time, are sharing or liking a piece to kind of own part of their struggle. I think that's the most tangible way that I see it. People saying, I showed this piece to my loved one and I've never been able to talk about it with them before, but this was kind of an easier thing I could do that at least opened the door a little bit. And just to know, even like seeing a piece about depression that has like hundreds of comments or a bunch of likes, it really makes you realize like, oh, this is not something I'm going through alone.
Right.
Like, a whole community of people who are all, spending time and looking at this one piece. I do hope that encourages people to kind of humanize a lot of these issues and realize that, sharing a mighty piece is a really good first step. Maybe that leads to a different conversation.
That's a great point. That's a great point. When I have people who go into residential treatment because they get suicidal or they have an addiction they can't control, one of the major things they come back saying to me is, I liked the people that were there with me. There were people, they'd be people that I'd hang out with. I had this stereotype of a heroin addict or someone who was suicidal or, anything like that. And then they'll come back and say, I don't have those stereotypes anymore. It's John and Jane and they're people, with these problems. And so it's a huge light bulb that goes on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And just getting names and faces to issues that seem so scary and isolating. I think that's everything.
You talked a little bit about sort of what's on the horizon, that y'all are starting a platform. I didn't quite understand if one of our listeners wanted to post something on the platform, what would they have to do?
Yeah, so it's so new. It's such a baby. I think I want to say it's like maybe 3 weeks old at this point.
Oh,
wow. But literally, you can go to themighty.com. The homepage actually looks different than you might remember if you've been there before. And if you don't already have an account, you can make an account, email, profile, basic stuff like that. And then you literally at the top right corner can press a button where you can post either a thought or a question. Oh. And that's our new platform. Obviously you can still submit a story. If you're someone who has an essay that you're hoping to share with the world, there's the same way you can submit your essays, but there's the second part where you can just post a thought, and we have comment moderators. We have people making sure that it's, the Mighty continues to be a safe place where people aren't posting spam or posting hate. But for the most part, it's free game. And we've seen a lot of good come out of it so far. It's actually been pretty amazing to see how many people are sharing their thoughts. One of my favorite things to see is someone sharing, maybe they're struggling, maybe they're sharing a dark thought, and I swoop in being like, oh, I have to help this person. And then 6 people have already commented on the thought, offering their support. So it's just started, but it's pretty cool. And the idea is to make the Mighty more, a little more accessible, right? Not everyone's a writer. Not everyone has time to write an essay, we don't want to limit people by one format. We want people to be able to connect and express themselves and get the same feeling that I've gotten when I publish an essay and a bunch of people like it, but in a smaller way on our platform. It's pretty cool. It's been exciting so far.
I get the metaphor of it's the difference between, I don't know, going to a seminar somewhere and doing that and then just having a conversation about it with friends. It's a lot less formal.
They're definitely just conversations, you don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to say anything even super profound.
Well, that's good.
No, it's a super, a very just judgment-free zone. And I think we're trying to be a place where someone who perhaps wants to express something but doesn't feel safe posting on Facebook for whatever reason can know that if they post something on the Mighty, they're going to be automatically surrounded by people who get it. That's what we're hoping for.
Well, I think that's a great direction to go in, and again, sort of makes it a little more casual, a little less foreboding for someone who doesn't think of themselves as being able to write very well, and just to say, this is where I am today, and get some feedback about that. I want y'all to know that Sarah's actually taking time off her vacation to be with us today. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure your mother and father are just delighted you're doing something professional.
They understand. They understand.
So thank you for that. And by the way, my son is in LA, and next time I come to LA, I'm coming to the offices of the Mighty, and I'm going to meet all of you in person.
I hope you like dogs.
I love dogs.
we have more than a few dogs in the Mighty office. It's very funny. Quick story. We found out our neighbors, we work in an office building with a few other places, and our neighbors thought that we were a dog grooming business because of all the dogs in our home. And we were like, oh my God, that's not even close to what we do, but it's so funny that you think that.
Oh, that is hilarious. That is hilarious.
Oh,
Well, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. I've been very grateful that some of my pieces were featured on The Mighty, and I just love doing the monthly Facebook Live. For any of you that might be interested, that happens every third Wednesday of the month at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we do all kinds of topics, depression, trauma, depression and anxiety. It's mostly based around depression, but it's been wonderful to get feedback from people all over the world about what they're going through. And it's always lots of questions. And so I keep very busy for about 30 or 40 minutes and try to think on my feet. But I love it and look forward to it every month. So
we're so lucky to have you. I mean, the Mighty, it's a platform, it's a space. Like we're nothing without people like you and like our contributors who share
sure.
their work with us, right? Without
Yeah.
that, we don't have value. So I love that you've done that for so long and that you keep doing it and that our
Yeah, it's
community
great.
keeps being
It's great.
engaged.
Well, I want to invite everybody who's listening to submit something to the Mighty or get on their platform. Again, it's themighty.com. And Sarah, thank you so much. And I'm going to meet you very soon.
Or cannot wait.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
So I thought that was a wonderful interview with Sarah Schuster, and I so appreciate her coming on. I hope you learned a lot about themighty.com. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm loving doing these interviews, and I hope that you're enjoying them too. I really am trying to bring you some of the interesting things that are happening, both nationally and internationally with mental health. So I've got some lined up, and I do hope you enjoy them. Again, there are many ways of reaching out to me and connecting with me. My email is askdrmargaret@drmargaretrutherford.com, and I love getting comments from all of you. My email is confidential, so no one else is going to see what you write, just me. And if you don't want me to talk about it on air, just simply tell me. Or you can go to my website, which is drmargaretrutherford.com, creatively enough, and you can subscribe there, and you'll get a weekly newsletter with my blog post and my podcast for that week, as well as a free copy of an ebook, which is called 7 Commandments of Good Therapy. It's about how to choose a good therapist. Then, of course, I so appreciate ratings and reviews. I think I said in the last podcast that I'd love to get up to 200 ratings on iTunes. I really try to stay away from those numbers, but wow, that would be fantastic. And of course, the reviews themselves give me information about what you're enjoying, how you're using SelfWork, and gives me an idea of how I can be most helpful to all of you. You can also subscribe, of course, and that's very motivational and inspiring for me when I realize that people are waiting to hear what I have to say, or if the topic is going to be interesting to them. I say frequently that we talk about very diverse things here at SelfWork, so one episode may not be your cup of tea, but the next one may fit you quite well. So thank you for being here. I so appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed Sarah Schuster and learning more about the Mighty. Take very good care. I'm Dr. Margaret, and you've been listening to SelfWork.